This is ThinkEnergy, the podcast that helps you better understand the fast-changing world of energy through conversations with game changers, industry leaders, and influencers. So join me, Dan Seguin, and my co-host Rebecca Schwartz as we explore both traditional and unconventional facets of the energy industry. Hey everyone, welcome back. On today's show, we're going to talk about buildings and the critical role they play in our country's transition to a lower carbon and eventual net zero future. They're where we live, work, and play, but buildings are responsible for 40% of global energy consumption and about a third of the world's greenhouse gas emissions.
That number is pretty significant, but becoming net zero is going to take money and new technology, new infrastructure, and a complete overhaul of how we construct, heat, and cool our buildings.
As we talked about on the show many times, technology is evolving at an accelerated rate, so much so that even today's most highly evolved smart buildings may be considered just the norm or standard a decade from now. So when is the right time for property developers and owners to jump in and lower their emissions and environmental impact?
The majority of commercial buildings we see now are more than 30 years old, so there's a desperate need for energy-efficient retrofits and upgrades. A lot goes into retrofitting an existing building to make it smart and attractive, comfortable, sustainable, and of course, cost-efficient. It involves much more than just updating your aging HVAC or stepping up the lighting by putting in a few fancy things you may have bought off Amazon.
So here's today's big question. What kind of planning needs to take place today to help future-proof our new and existing commercial buildings so they can lower their carbon footprint and eventually achieve net zero target later?
Our special guest today is Terry Young. He's the Vice President of Operations at KRP Properties. Terry manages a portfolio of more than 30 commercial properties in Ottawa's high-tech hub in Canada. Welcome to the show.
Hey Terry, how are you? We know that buildings contribute 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions globally. What are some of the steps that developers and property owners should consider or be aware of when it comes to future-proofing their buildings, and why?
So I think one thing is understanding the current state of your building. Many of us, we run pieces of real estate, but we really don't know how it's running or where it sits or how efficient it is. So I think the first thing you got to do is understand where your building is in terms of your carbon burn, your energy burns, etc. And that's probably the first step to start with today. How much energy are we using, and can I be more efficient?
Now, how practical is it for building owners to adopt these new technologies?
So I think it's quite practical, actually. And we've been very fortunate to have a really good relationship with Hydro Ottawa, and we've actually been involved with Envari, and we monitor our utility burns in real time. So with every 15 minutes or whatever it is, I can tell you exactly how much energy we're burning, both utility-wise, energy being electricity, gas, and water. Now, if you don't monitor, you can't change. So basically, the first step is to start monitoring, and we've been very fortunate. Likewise, the software that we've provided, they can, it's just some analytical data that we can provide to understand trends, to understand where your building is moving, etc. So yeah, it's quite practical. Now it's not cheap, but I think it's so worth it.
Maybe a good place to start is what exactly is a smart building? And what are some examples of how technology can connect tenants and property managers in ways that matter?
So I think there's a lot of definitions on smart buildings, and if you talk to 5 people, you'll have 5 different answers. But I think if I were to give you a definition of what a smart building is, it's centralized control. Basically, I can control pretty well anything in the building from one central area, be it the temperature, the humidity, the HVAC systems, the electrical systems, the lighting systems. And so I think that's what I would call a smart building. That's such, Rebecca, this can be scaled as well, but you can have a really small amount of smarts or you can have a very large amount of smarts, but it's the same kind of linear path to what you're trying to get to, right?
Terry, is it fair to say that we're not only talking about the health of the building or its impact on the environment, but also the health and comfort of its occupants? What are some of the positive ways smart buildings impact the people who use them?
There's so many things that the quality of the environment is, and there's studies out there, and I've read 50 of them, if I've read 100, about, if you can increase your quality of work, be it your air quality, your ability to quickly get to the office, your ability to park quickly, all of these things actually adds directly to the productivity line. There are many companies out there that can actually monitor how much and what productivity looks like. And there's a direct correlation to building health. Absolutely. Technology can easily assist you in that. Now, when I say assist, you still need to have a lot of background, and your building has to be intelligent to do this, but there's direct correlations absolutely between, how well you're running your building, how smart your building is, and productivity of the occupants inside that building, right?
Okay, here's a follow-up question. Do you think future-proofing may now include reducing the spread of germs in buildings? Have you seen anything that might stick around after COVID-19, like temperature readings before employees enter the building, maybe even ventilation standards?
The ASHRAE standard. So ASHRAE is an organization that sort of monitors and regulates, I suppose, how air gets distributed within a facility. A very, very good organization. When COVID first hit, they actually put out a different way of running your buildings, and they set parameters on how to do that. I think that's going to be part of the course moving forward, for sure. I'm not sure heat or temperature, taking your temperature or anything, if that's going to continue. However, there's a lot of face recognition currently available right now that actually are coinciding with your door passes and your fob keys. As soon as they see your face, it opens your door. It's easily known, and it's already built into a lot of these platforms that it takes your temperature. Whether that's going to be moving forward, I'm not sure. I do think that how people are running their buildings is going to be at, or will continue to be at, a really, really higher level than it was in the past, because our clients are demanding this. The unfortunate part is, back 30, 40 years ago, when we built a lot of these buildings, the systems that were there were built very much to code at the time, but they don't exceed, or they aren't to code now. So what we're having to do is, as the asset needs to be replaced, we do, and we are able to put in that bigger, better system. But the ductwork and the existing spaces are only so big. So it can't do what a hospital does, for instance. And not to get to bore you or your audience here, but a hospital can actually do many, many air filtration changes. They literally take all the air out of one space and take it out and put fresh air in much more effectively and efficiently than a normal commercial building would, because that's the way it is. So we have some work to do for sure. We have put a number. When I say a number, it's probably 20 or 30 things that we've done to and fine tune, because we were always kind of doing them. And these are like special MERV rating filters, they're mechanical air filtration units, humidity control, all of this stuff we fine tuned, and now we monitor and are very aware on a real time basis on the quality of that air that gets pumped in there, and how many times we can actually filter that air out. So we're very, very aware, and I think that's going to be something that you're going to see building owners and property owners really having a cognizant awareness of how that works.
As climate change continues to evolve, the demand for space heating and cooling rises along with it. Many organizations are seeing their heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system taking the most significant bite out of their bottom line. So my question to you is, what options exist, and what does the future of smart HVAC tech look like?
So I can speak for an hour here. I know we don't have an hour, but in the last 2 or 3 years, or maybe last 5 or 6 years now, we've taken up 3 or 4 gigs off our grid out here just by running, I shouldn't say that, in conjunction with asset replacement, but just by running our buildings better and faster, more efficiently. So you think about it, 3 gigs is a lot of electricity, right? So, and this is through our analytical software, and this is all. And I should say probably 60 or 70% of that savings has come from our ability to run things more efficiently. And basically, to simplify it, we have a bunch of data that we get fed in, and we have analytics that actually feeds that data and understands it a million times a second kind of thing. No human could do it, but they create efficiencies in the system. So if you looked at, from a climate change perspective, and if you're not running these analytical platforms, you're behind. Likewise, the minute you turn these things on, it's an instant 15 or 20% saving. So I think that's a huge thing. Likewise, your energy and carbon are very directly correlated. So the minute you save energy in our world, you're saving your carbon burn as well.
Great segue to this next question, Terry. Wondering if you could expand on how data from HVAC systems improves energy management through automation and predictive analysis that forecasts adjustments based on historical data to enhance and manage overall energy consumption.
So your eyes are going to glaze over now. So just pause because I'm going to get technical and not technical. And I enjoy this kind of thing too as well. So and I'll try to put it down to words everybody can understand. But in a building, there's a bunch of relationships. So there's a big HVAC unit on the roof, and then there's a box that's down there in the ductwork kind of thing that opens and closes and stuff. And then there's a thermostat right there on the wall. So basically, that's one relationship. Okay. So basically, if you turn up, you go 70 degrees. That means the little baffle in the VAV box opens a little bit and pushes enough air in so you're comfortable. Okay. Now the fan needs to work at, I don't know, whatever percentage that is. So what happens is with the analytical data and the analytics, it creates an efficiency within that system. So that's one relationship. Now, if you're in an office with 30 offices, there's 30 different relationships. So the software sits on top there like an umbrella and understands in real time all of these demands on the system. So if you have a 60 horsepower motor and you have reheat coils and you have a whole pile of systems working in conjunction and simultaneously with one another, what this software does, it goes, how can I minimize the use of all of this system to maintain its comfort? So instead of running a 60 horsepower, so 15 years ago, I turn on that motor, I got 60 horses or 30 horses, whatever it is, full bore. And basically, I fill the system full of static pressure and I just open it ever so slightly, but I've run the entire system for my office, which is 200 square feet. So now with these new systems, I don't need to do that anymore. There's variable speed drives, which basically means it's like a gas pedal now. So I only press the gas the amount of kilometers and the speed that I want. So that relationship from the thermostat that's on the wall says I only need to go 5 kilometers an hour, which is 5 horsepower. So also my office next door, if they need 5 horsepower or 5 kilometers an hour, that might be 5 simultaneously. So they'll take that same sort of static pressure, that same temp air, and they'll dump it into his or her office as well. So you see how efficient this is throughout the entire system. So, and again, this is in theory, after I explain it, it's so simple, but we weren't running our real estate like that 15 years ago. But when you do that, 2 things happen. One is I save a massive amount of energy. Actually, 3 things. 2, I maintain really, really comfortable spaces. And 3, and this is the big one here, from a CapEx perspective, and if you're a finance person, you're looking at this stuff and you're saying, well, I don't need to replace that motor anymore. And usually these lifespans of these motors are pretty definite, right? So it's 17 years. Now I can push that out to 22 years or 27 years, that kind of deal. So it's good. It's good every which way but loose, right?
A short time ago, the federal government introduced new funding and new initiatives to help support the commercial sector. They promised $3 billion to establish a net zero accelerator fund to help large emitters reduce their emissions. What are some of the highlights and what should clients know?
So I'm not the guy to be talking to about this really, but I mean, there's three criteria, three pillars, I suppose. There's one for, they call it decarbonization. And so this is like for large emitters. These are big manufacturing plants there. And there's new technology called carbon capturing as well. So it's big machines, look like big dishwashers. Not really, but they're giant. And it takes the bad things and they actually can make that into either a brick or something that can be utilized in a cement factory or whatever. So it takes carbon out of the system, which is good. The second pillar is that it's clean technology and industrial transformation. And I think the third one is a huge push for battery ecosystem. One of the big things we have here, we have really cool technology, but our batteries and the battery technology has not kept up. And I say that there's huge advancements, but we're still not there. You know, you look at the cars, for instance, you know, the Tesla gets about 600 or 700 kilometers out of a tank in a perfect conditioned world. That's still not good enough for Canada. It might be okay for California, but where we have a geographic issue, we need 1,000 or more out of one charge, right? So we need a lot of technology push and R&D push. So I think that's where in the short term, this is where the Canada, most of that money is going to go. And there's 5 or 6 funds that you can actually apply for as well.
We've tackled some of the pros. What are some of the barriers to the adoption of smart building solutions and reducing emissions? Are the fears or concerns you've heard valid?
So, yeah, I think the barriers is twofold. One, it's financial. And this has to be tied to a financial place somewhere. And if it's not tied to cost, it just won't happen. And it's very expensive. But number two is you need a corporate champion. You need somebody at the table at the C-suite to really understand what that means to the company, to the world, to whatever. And so ultimately, that's where the issue is right now. We got a lot of guys at the C-suite are a little older. They got more gray hair or less hair, depends which side of the table you're on. But you know, so what's important to me is not what's important to my son, who's 22. And so what you're seeing is, you know, with the cost of everything going up, supply chain issues, the cost of labor going crazy, all this kind of stuff, this is going to be very expensive. This also, from a carbon costing perspective, with our federal government plans implemented, you know, in the ready, I suppose, or getting more expensive every day, you better have a plan in place, or you're going to get nipped really, really quickly. And so I think that's some of the biggest barriers or fears are they don't really understand it. So there's a C-suite kind of need to change from a championship, and again, the financial component of this stuff.
Okay, now, care to expand on some of the biggest opportunities for return on investment in smart building solutions that folks either haven't thought of or even considered? Is there anything you would recommend?
So two really is two of the things are energy savings, and we talked about that. Full stop, real quick and easy. Turn the page. Number two is tenant retention, and this is from a financial play. So the better you run your building, the more efficient you run your building, you got a better chance of attracting and keeping the tenant. So if you looked at what our world is looking like now, where is the new office going to be, right? So you need to make sure that your space is as good or as better than any other of your competitors. And one of the ways of doing that is to, for sure, making your operating costs lower, thus decreasing your energy. So in our portfolio, in most portfolios, it's probably 25% of your operating costs. It's quite chunky. So if you got a 30,000 square foot building and it's 25% of your cost, it's a lot of money. So if you can shave a point, or in our case, 20 points, it you know, that client can actually push that money to someplace else. So it's very, very a good thing. Likewise, if you're running your buildings very, very well, people want to be there, and the productivity again is up, and thus they make their more money as well.
So what about your building? What are some of the advanced building technologies that you've implemented in your properties? And how did you get buy-in from decision makers?
So we've probably played with a lot data analytics. We played with artificial intelligence, a lot of IoT devices. We've played with, data points. It comes back down to how can we run a better building. It's best practice, and we're very much trying to be leaders. We're trying to be industry leaders, not just in Ottawa, but in the world, on how better you can run a piece of real estate. So we've tried pretty well. If it's out there, we could afford it. We've played with it. What the problem is it's very easy to implement new technology into new real estate. Anybody can do that. What's difficult is when you have an aging piece of real estate, be it 30 years old. In our world, that's aging, by the way. How do you implement and how do you overlay with a backbone and a front end of a new piece of technology? It's very costly and very impacting of the actual building and its tenants as well. So this is what we've done. We've actually started taking floor a year, for instance. So we've actually digitized and a floor per year. If there's 7 years and we had 7 floors, that sometimes happens when the building can't necessarily, afford it. So, we've probably tried everything that's out there or pretty close in our repertoire. And some of the cool stuff, and I'll get back to the analytics. I mean, we have one of our facilities a few years ago that the AI could take over, and the certain department would go for pints on a Thursday, and that whole department would shut down. The lighting would shut down, the building the air conditioning would shut down. So the bosses would walk by and wonder where's going on. But the building had taken over, knowing that there's a repetition. So every Thursday, if they went for pints with the boys, the building would actually understand that and decrease the lighting areas and decrease the energy. So it's very, very cool technology. Not necessarily for the guys, but so there's, lots of huge energy savings as well. So lots of cool stuff.
In terms of ability to implement these solutions, is there enough of a skilled workforce ready and available? What's your experience been like from the operational side?
Yeah, so the quick answer is no. We're really, that's a struggle. Just like it's a trade, it's a skill, so you have to be half an IT guy, you have to be half an HVAC mechanic, you have to be part electrician. So they're not, we have 1, 2 on staff maybe, and they're about 10 years older than I am. So they're not going to be here forever. So, and we're not being able to backstop that very well. Our universities and colleges certainly are putting out good tradespeople, but this is a very unique kind of niche market. So people usually get into this by mistake. And so it's very rare. So that being said, there are some really cool companies out there that we work with, and I'll shout out to Modern Niagara. Very, very, they're a contractor they work for. They have a team dedicated to this stuff specifically, which is awesome for us. So we just call when we have an issue. We don't have to need in-house expertise. So some contractors are leading the edge in that space. So we don't necessarily need an expert on staff. We can call somebody.
Now, Terry, what piece of advice would you give to large commercial property owners and those in large industries about their emission reduction target dates for, let's say, 2030, even 2040 and 2050?
So I'm not sure I'm the guy to give advice on this stuff. There's certainly companies and people out there, further along on their journey than we are, but, you have to have a plan. And I was at a conference on Thursday of last week, and a really smart guy, he was telling me a story about a blog he read. He said, if you're not at the table today in carbon reduction strategy, tomorrow you will be on the menu. Okay? Put that on a bumper sticker, because I did. But that's very, very intuitive and smart. So if you're not at the table today when it comes to carbon and energy reductions, you will be on the menu tomorrow. Get and know what you're burning. Know what carbon, where you stand and where you want to go. It's going to be so expensive to do business tomorrow and the next day. Carbon pricing is going to be most of our buildings, and this is the other issue, and I won't get into it too deep, but we got a lot of government agencies here, and bless their heart, and I love them all. They're sucking and blowing, right? So we have, in one side, we have the people giving us a rebate to take electricity out and put gas units in. That same year, I'm getting double the bill for burning gas, and they want me to turn back to electricity. This is the same bunch of guys. Nobody's singing from the same songbook. So, like, what do? These programs, when you put in an HVAC unit, it's good for 20 years. So you can't just tomorrow turn around and spend $300,000 to change an HVAC unit. It doesn't work that way, right? So now we have to bear that carbon pricing or whatever that is for a long, long time. So the government needs to really get on the same page, both provincially, federally, and municipality-wise, locally, to really let's actually get a plan together. And although, Mr. Trudeau may be quite aggressive to what he's trying to do, it's going to be very detrimental to business too as well. And this is where we don't know the net effect. We in Ontario have the highest energy prices in North America per capita. There's no other place that has more. The cost of electricity here is more than anywhere in North America. So if we have to compete for talent, we have to compete for anybody, clients, operating costs, manufacturing facilities, et cetera, when they look at Ontario, we're not as aggressive in that area. Now, are there other ways of doing it? Absolutely. I think we really are doing our part. And I think we're batting well above our weight class when it comes to carbon emissions, because we only, we're this much in the world of what, we impact. So I think we're way above our weight class for sure.
Ultimately, what do you hope these emission targets will achieve for companies and municipalities? Will they be required to innovate and plan for a sustainable future and control costs?
Yeah. So the answer is yes. They these carbon targets, good, bad, or ugly, we will have to bring those into our business model. They're going to be very expensive. So somewhere the cost has to sort of balance itself, right? And at the end of the day, it's my son and my son's son. It's my grandkids that we're trying to help out here. And we've not necessarily done an okay job. I think there's many companies, and it wasn't something that anybody thought of 30 years ago. My dad's generation, it wasn't there. It was, it's climate change is no such thing kind of deal, right? But it really is. It's real. The data is real. The science is real. And if we don't nip this and control it or try to mitigate it, we're going to be in a lot more trouble than we are. And again, it comes back down to that corporate champion that I was talking about earlier. We really need some corporate champions at the C-suites to make this something important. Balancing finance, balancing costs. This is where the government comes in. You can't put all of this on the backs of industry. It's going to be impossible. Industry will fail. It's financially not doable in some circumstances. So there's going to have to be a give and take. There's going to have to be a relationship. There's going to have to be, how can we get there together? And it's not going to be easy. It really is not going to be easy.
Now, let's fast forward to post-pandemic. What is your prediction for commercial real estate? Will people return to their office towers like before, or has there been a shift? What's your prediction?
I think there will be a back to the office thing. I don't know what it's going to look like. I'll even put $5 on it. That's how confident I am. It's the right thing for a human being to be. Okay. There's a number of studies, and I'm quite well read up on this. Research and development, patents, for instance, patents are down, a decrease. There's a reason for that. When a human gets involved with another human, there's magic, there's chemistry. When you're down in your basement, that doesn't happen. It needs to be closed quarters, and I give the analogy, if you play golf, when you actually golf with a person who's a lot better than you, you may be, say, a 15 handicapped, and you're playing with sixes. Your game instantly goes up. So everybody's game just goes a little bit sharper, a little bit faster. That's where the magic happens, And there's a term that they've pegged, I think, is social malnutrition, where people need or lack the social interaction, and we're sociable creatures, right? And I'll tell you, the water cooler banter, that whole social, going to hockey every Thursday night with the boys, that is magic. And that's what happens, if you look at a de-stress and you look at at the emotional intelligence and understanding how your office is working and stuff. In the past, how you would de-escalate a really hard week. If you're not in the office and you can't have these normal rules or normal things that you do, the stress seems to build, and that's what scares me the most, I think, when it comes to tomorrow and the next day. So I really think people will be back in the office. I think there might be a hybrid model, but I think it's going to be the exception, not the rule. So I think you're going to have, 2 days, 3 days in, out, whatever. And, if you need a day or two to get your paperwork done and get out of and get a bunch of work done, absolutely. But they're going to come back to the office and you will want that. And I think companies and will require that as well, because that's where the productivity and that's where the magic happens.
All right. You mentioned that feeling of stress. Can you elaborate a little bit on what keeps you up at night and what makes you nervous?
So, I sleep like a baby, so I don't, I'm not a big stressful fella, but I think if I were to say one thing is knowing, the pressures that are on our people and the stresses. The mental health tally and toll has taken is going to be a generation to really comprehend. And that, if I were to look at one thing, that's probably the biggest thing that I worry about, I suppose, when it comes to, this whole post-pandemic thing. It's a toll. It's a toll on a lot of people. And I only wish that wasn't the case, and you can feel it in your workplace. It's not a good thing.
And what about things like cybersecurity? Has that been a top priority for the commercial real estate industry?
So, yeah, that's a big question for sure. And the answer is yes, and more yes. Because the more, we've talked about smart buildings, we've talked about IP, we've talked about protocols, that all of this smart technology, it speaks a language. That language is on the internet. Likewise, when I said to describe what a smart building is, it's centrally controlled. How do you centrally control it? You centrally control it by being on the internet. There's bad people, bad guys on the internet. So, most hits that have happened in modern day usually comes from a building automation system back door somewhere. So we very much are in that space. There's a couple of really cool technologies out there, local, by the way, that sort of, they call it covalence. It's the type of cybersecurity, and it understands the language and the pathways of which this data travels. Very much analytical based as well, and AI. And it's local guy, local firm, really smart bunch of guys. And so they actually can take your building automation systems and sort of give a level of protection that normally you wouldn't have. So we've created a bit of a lock and key process on how you enter and exit some of these networks. And so it's very top of mind, and it's every year. It's not when, or it's not if, it's when.
Okay, Terry, I know this isn't your first podcast rodeo. So as a result, we came up with some new rapid fire questions. I hope you are ready, sir.
Not really.
Terry, what are you reading right now?
So this is funny because it doesn't, I'm not a big reader, but I'm actually reading 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act. Funny enough, my son, who's an avid reader on this, it's a really good piece of literature. And disturbing, by the way. It's a pretty good read. I'm about halfway through. It's not good, but anyway, it's good and bad, whatever.
Now I'm looking forward to this answer. What would you name your boat if you had one? Do you have one?
She'll do for now. Yeah. No, I'm a big boat person, buddy. I've always owned a boat, and everybody got the 2 foot itis, eh? Every year you need extra 2 feet. So my dad came up with this many years ago. Yeah, she'll do for now, boy. and I'm from Newfoundland. So it's she'll do for now, meaning that it's okay till I get my new one. Because a boat is it's not good because you got a 16-footer, you need an 18. You got an 18, you need 20. So yeah, she'll do for now.
Who is someone that you admire?
And I just said him, my dad, he's a really, really good guy. He retired when he was 62 and went back to school and became a paramedic. And now he's 74 and still active. Just one of those guys. He just loves life, and he's just the best human being that I know.
Now, what is the closest thing to real magic that you've witnessed?
Yeah, I'm not a big magic fan. I'm not sure. I thought about this one. I really don't know.
What has been the biggest challenge to you personally since the pandemic?
So two things came to mind when this question came up. Is for me, the challenge, I live in a cabin, by the way, and up on the water. And so this pandemic thing, I'm out in the bush, I'm an outdoorsy guy. So this pandemic, it meant nothing to me. Like when it regards to life, I was very fortunate to work for an amazing company. We didn't have to let anybody off. So we were able to work from home. And yeah, so my world is started off in the bush anyway. So I'm not a big in the city person. So, that didn't affect me, but come back to the mental health of our folks, that the relationship stresses that I see, how can we as a team make our company better? So if you look at the challenge here is this caused a big problem. And now how can we make it better? How can we create plans? How can we put in place, in our company, we're developing a very, a wellness strategy. It's called KRP Me, and it's based on this new world. So we had what I consider a pretty good plan before. Now we're making it better. And because of the new changing circumstances, everybody, their benefits are here. The company's been like this for 35 years. It's all the same. Well, the world has changed. And if you as a company or as a leader that runs a company, if you don't understand that what you had yesterday is not good for the day, you're going to lose people. There's going to be a shift. And you're only not going to lose people to other companies. You're going to lose people with other issues. So we're really trying aggressively to put a plan in place that doesn't happen.
Okay, we've all been watching a lot of Netflix and TV lately. What's your favorite movie or show?
So, this I don't know what this says about me, but my favorite movie is Talladega Nights with Will Ferrell. Best movie ever, boys. Best movie ever. Shake and bake. Yeah.
And lastly, Terry, what is exciting you about your industry right now?
So I think, it's a great question. The industry, what's exciting me is this new generation of people we got coming up, eh? And I'm talking about my son's generation. He's 25, 22, actually he's 23. We're going on to 24. He just got his first job. And he started to look at where he wanted to work, not who would accept him. But so he started looking at what is the company's culture, what is the company's sustainability practices, et cetera, et cetera. Now, he has a degree in international business. He speaks 3 languages. This kid is, I'm partial too, but we also have here 3 or 4 of those young people who are articulate. They're extremely smart. They have a work ethic. They have balance. Everything that there's things that I sort of, if I wish I could have had back then. So I think there's a generation of young people that are brilliant. And that's what really I see as exciting. We were at a conference, I was telling you last week, and we had 2 younger staff members there. And I was proud to sit in the middle of them. They got up and they could walk the room, they could work the room, and they're passionate about sustainability. They're passionate about business. And then they also have this balance that we may, as my generation, we may have went a little bit further on the one side. So they don't have that balance problem. So they know what's important in their family. They know how to do a good job. And, you hear about this generations coming up is not good. You've heard all these old timers and stuff. That's true for every generation. There are bad apples everywhere. But I'll tell you, these young people that we got, coming up. There's a really good vibe out there, and I'm really excited to see what they're going to do, what the world is going to be look like. So we look at, and we can sum up here with the carbon sustainability and stuff. It's going to take that generation. That's important to them. So when my son or your son gets at that C-suite level, he's going to be, his wallet's already full. He knows exactly what and how he's going to run that company to make sure that for his kids, sustainability and carbon and all of this stuff, that's the only saving grace. They're going to be able to reverse some of the damage that we've done because that's how they operate. So that's what makes me exciting about the industry. The technology is great, and I mean we can play with that, but and it comes down to good people running the technology. Without the good people, that technology is relatively useless to a point, right? So that's what I'm excited about.
Well, Terry, this is it. We've reached the end of another episode of the ThinkEnergy podcast. If our listeners want to learn more about you and your organization, how can they connect?
So KRPProperties.com, for sure, reach out, and there's an info page and there's a connect page, a slot there on the website. It's pretty simple stuff.
Again, my friend, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you had a lot of fun.
Hey, I did. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the ThinkEnergy podcast. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening. And to find out more about today's guest or previous episodes, visit ThinkEnergyPodcast.com. I hope you'll join us again next time as we spark even more conversations about the energy of tomorrow.